Standing at the altar in my grandmother's lace wedding gown, I watched my future mother-in-law, Eleanor, whisper to her country club friend while staring at my mother. The words carried across the silent church. "That's not a mother? That's a mistaken address." 200 guests gasped. My mother's hands trembled as she clutched her oxygen tank, her paralyzed left side hidden beneath the special dress we'd chosen together. When my fiancé Nathan laughed, something inside me shattered forever. 6 months earlier, Nathan proposed at his family's Martha's Vineyard estate during their annual charity gala. Crystal chandeliers cast dancing shadows across the marble terrace where 500 guests sipped champagne from gold-rimmed flutes. The Sterling family owned Sterling Industries, a real estate empire that controlled half of Boston's luxury properties, and their summer estate showcased every ounce of their wealth. I was just a pediatric nurse from Southie, the working-class neighborhood, where triple-deckers lined narrow streets, and everyone knew their neighbor's business. My mother, Sarah, raised me alone after Dad died in Iraq when I was 3, his bronze star folded with the flag she kept on our mantle. That night at the gala, I felt like Cinderella in my borrowed dress, watching Boston's elite discuss yacht purchases and private school admissions. Nathan found me hiding by the fountain, overwhelmed by women comparing their tennis bracelets. "There's my beautiful girlfriend," he said, his Harvard smile making my heart race. "Come on, there's something I need to do." He led me through the crowd to the bandstand where the orchestra suddenly stopped playing. 500 faces turned toward us. Isabel Marie Thompson. Nathan began dropping to one knee. The 3-carat diamond caught every light in the garden. "You've brought something real into my world of pretense. Will you marry me?" The crowd erupted in applause when I said yes, champagne toasts flowing like water. But through the celebration, I noticed Eleanor Sterling's smile never reached her eyes. Her perfect blonde bob stayed motionless as she air-kissed well-wishers, her Chanel suit as rigid as her posture. When Nathan lifted me off my feet, spinning me around, his mother's expression tightened like she'd bitten into something sour. Later that night, while guests danced to a 20-piece orchestra, Eleanor found me alone on the wine cellar stairs. The stone walls held centuries of vintages, worth more than my nursing salary would earn in a lifetime. "You're a sweet girl, Isabel," she said, her voice smooth as aged whiskey. "But marriages work best when families match. I trust you understand what's best for everyone." The threat wrapped in silk confused me. Nathan loved me. I loved him. Wasn't that enough? "I don't understand, Mrs. Sterling." Her manicured hand patted my shoulder like I was a slow child. "Of course you don't, dear. That's precisely the point." She glided back to the party, leaving me shivering despite the warm night. Nathan found me there later, pulling me into his arms. "Mom can be intense," he admitted, "but she'll warm up once she knows you better. How could anyone not love you?" I believed him then, drunk on love and champagne, the diamond weight on my finger, promising a future I'd never dared imagine. The laughter from the party drifted down like fairy dust, and I let myself believe I could belong in Nathan Sterling's world. The Sterling family had standards for everything. 2 days after our engagement, Eleanor presented me with a leather-bound folder containing what she called improvement opportunities. Inside were brochures for etiquette classes, a speech coach to refine my Boston accent, and a personal shopper who would help me dress appropriately for the Sterling name. "Think of it as polishing a diamond," Eleanor explained over lunch at her private club where the wallpaper cost more than my car. "You have potential, Isabel. We just need to bring it out." Nathan squeezed my hand under the table. "Mom's trying to help Belle. She did the same thing for my sister's husband. It's like joining the family business." So I went to etiquette classes where stern women taught me the difference between a fish fork and a salad fork, how to exit a car without showing too much leg, and the proper way to laugh. Never too loud, never showing back teeth. The speech coach made me repeat phrases until my neighborhood vowels smoothed into acceptable neutrality. "Park the car in Harvard Yard" became my personal torture. I donated my entire savings to Eleanor's preferred charity, the Sterling Foundation for Excellence in Education, though I later learned it mainly funded scholarships for wealthy children to attend Swiss boarding schools. At charity luncheons, I sat silent while women discussed their husbands' portfolios and their children's lacrosse achievements, feeling like a sparrow among peacocks. The turning point came during Eleanor's first visit to my apartment. I'd cleaned for days, fresh flowers in every room, but her nose wrinkled the moment she entered. "How cozy," she murmured, running a finger along my bookshelf like checking for dust. She stopped at my photo wall, freezing at Mom's picture from my nursing school graduation. My mother sat proud in her wheelchair, wearing her best dress, holding my diploma like a trophy. The left side of her face showed the slight droop from her stroke, but her smile radiated joy. "Is that your mother?" Eleanor's voice carried the same tone people use when identifying roadkill. "Yes," I said, my spine straightening. "She had a stroke during my birth. She's partially paralyzed, but completely independent. She's the strongest person I know." Eleanor studied the photo like it was evidence in a crime. "A stroke during birth. How unfortunate. And she raised you alone after that." I explained about Dad's death, Mom's determination to work despite her disability, the 3 jobs she juggled while learning to do everything one-handed. Pride swelled in my chest as I talked about her refusing government assistance beyond Dad's military benefits, insisting on earning our way. "Well," Eleanor set down the photo carefully, like it might contaminate her. "We'll need to discuss how to present this situation to our social circle. Perhaps we could say she's recovering from an accident. Something more recent and less complicated." "There's nothing complicated about my mother," I said, heat rising in my cheeks. "She's a hero." Eleanor's laugh tinkled like breaking glass. "Of course, dear, but you must understand the Sterling family has an image to maintain. We can't have people thinking there's inferior genetics in the bloodline." The room tilted. "Inferior genetics." "Oh, don't be dramatic. I'm simply being practical. Nathan will need strong, healthy children to carry on the Sterling legacy. We can't have people worrying about inherited conditions." I wanted to scream that strokes during childbirth weren't genetic, that my mother's disability came from complications, not DNA. But Eleanor was already moving on, critiquing my furniture choices, and suggesting I remove all photos before the engagement party. That night, Nathan listened to my tears with what I thought was sympathy. "She didn't mean it that way," he soothed. "Mom's just old-fashioned. Once she sees what an amazing mother you'll be, she'll forget all about this." But the seed of doubt was planted. Every Sterling family event became a minefield where I watched Eleanor introduce my mother as Isabel's guardian, or quickly change subjects when people asked about my parents. The standards kept rising, the goalposts moving whenever I thought I'd finally earned acceptance. I perfected my curtsy, mastered wine pairings, learned polo terminology, but it was never enough. Because the one thing Eleanor truly wanted me to change was the one thing I never could where I came from, and who had raised me to be the woman her son had fallen in love with. Wedding planning started the day after Eleanor's visit to my apartment. She arrived at Nathan's penthouse with 3 binders, a wedding planner named Vivian, who dressed exclusively in cream-colored suits, and a smile sharp enough to cut glass. "I've taken the liberty of securing the country club for next June," Eleanor announced, spreading fabric swatches across Nathan's Italian leather couch, the same venue where Richard and I married 35 years ago. "Tradition is so important, don't you think?" I dreamed of a small ceremony at St. Mary's, the church where my parents had married, where I'd been baptized in my father's arms just weeks before his deployment. But when I mentioned this, Vivian's face contorted like I'd suggested getting married at a truck stop. "St. Mary's." Eleanor's voice could have frozen champagne. In South Boston, dear, the parking alone would be impossible for our guests. Besides, the country club has hosted Sterling weddings for 3 generations. Nathan rubbed my shoulders. The club is beautiful, Belle. You'll love it once you see the gardens. So, the venue was decided without my input. Guest list came next, a battle I lost before it began. Eleanor and Vivienne had already compiled 400 names, business associates, society families, and what Eleanor called essential connections. 400. I stared at the gilt-edged cards. I was thinking maybe 50 people, family and close friends. Vivienne actually gasped. 50, Mrs. Sterling, perhaps we should discuss this privately. No need. Eleanor's tone could have etched crystal. Isabel simply doesn't understand the social obligations involved. Richard's position requires certain acknowledgments. Plus, we must consider Nathan's political future. This was news to me. Political future. Nathan shifted uncomfortably. Dad thinks I should run for state senate eventually. Wedding guests become campaign donors, you know. My side of the list kept shrinking. Eleanor vetoed my college roommates, not our social circle. My nursing colleagues, we can't have the help mingling with guests. And most of Mom's friends, the venue has strict accessibility limits. In the end, I was allowed 25 names, including my mother. But the real explosion came over my wedding dress. My grandmother's gown hung in Mom's closet, preserved in acid-free tissue since 1952. Hand-sewn French lace cascaded from a sweetheart neckline, thousands of seed pearls catching light like stars. Grandma had worked nights for 6 months to afford the fabric, sewing each stitch, with dreams of her daughter's future. It's beautiful, I whispered to Mom as we lifted it from its box. Like something from a fairy tale. She wore it to marry your grandfather, Mom said, her good hand stroking the fabric. Then I wore it to marry your father. 3 weeks later, he proposed with his grandmother's ring, said he wanted our daughters to wear both someday. I tried it on, and despite the decades, it fit like destiny. Mom cried as I twirled the skirt, floating like clouds. You look just like her, she whispered. She would be so proud. Eleanor's reaction was different. She arrived for a dress fitting at Kleinfeld's to find me already decided. Her face went through several expressions before settling on disgusted disbelief. You're joking, she said flatly. That dress is older than I am. It's my grandmother's, a family heirloom. How heirloom? Eleanor circled me like a shark. Darling, heirlooms are jewels or estates. This is just old. Look at this neckline, completely outdated, and the color ivory is so aging. You need pure white, something fresh and modern. Vivienne nodded eagerly. I've already pulled several Vera Wang options. Timeless elegance with contemporary flair. I'm wearing my grandmother's dress, I said quietly. Eleanor's laugh could have shattered windows. In front of my friends, the mayor's wife, the governor's daughter, they'll think we couldn't afford to buy you something new. I don't care what they think. The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. Eleanor stepped close enough that I could smell her perfume, something expensive and suffocating. Oh, you should care, she hissed. You're marrying my son, not some construction worker from your neighborhood. This wedding will be photographed for society pages. I won't have people laughing at the Sterling name because you're too sentimental to dress appropriately. Nathan walked in, then taking in the scene. What's going on? Your fiancé insists on wearing this costume. Eleanor gestured at my dress like it was infectious. Talk sense into her. I waited, heart-pounding, for Nathan to defend me. Instead, he studied the dress with a frown. It is pretty old-fashioned, Belle. Maybe Mom has a point about photos. That night, I found my mother touching the dress with tears streaming down her face. Maybe Eleanor's right, she whispered. I don't want to embarrass you on your special day. We could sell it, put the money towards something new. Never, I said fiercely, holding her tight. I'm wearing Grandma's dress because it represents real love, not status. if Eleanor doesn't understand that it's her loss. But as wedding plans proceeded, each battle took its toll. Flowers had to be white orchids, not my preferred wildflowers. The menu featured French cuisine I couldn't pronounce instead of the Italian feast I'd wanted. Even the music was chosen by committee, a string quartet playing classical pieces instead of the band my parents had hired for their reception. I kept telling myself it was one day that marriage mattered more than a wedding. But watching Eleanor systematically erase every personal touch felt like watching myself disappear, replaced by a Sterling-approved version that looked right in photographs but felt hollow as an empty vase. The war was subtle but constant, and I was losing ground with every compromise every time Nathan said, "Just this once for Mom." I didn't realize until too late that Eleanor wasn't planning my wedding. She was planning my erasure. The rehearsal dinner was Eleanor's masterpiece of controlled perfection. The Ritz-Carlton ballroom glowed with soft golden light from crystal chandeliers, each table adorned with white orchids that cost more than a week's groceries. Eleanor had overseen every detail personally, from the hand-calligraphed place cards to the 7-course tasting menu featuring ingredients I couldn't spell. My mother arrived exactly on time wearing the navy dress we'd spent weeks selecting. It accommodated her limited mobility while maintaining the elegance Eleanor demanded, though nothing would ever be elegant enough for my future mother-in-law. Mom had practiced walking without her wheelchair for months, determined to use just her specialized cane for the wedding events. "You look beautiful," I whispered, meeting her at the entrance. She smiled, though I caught the flash of pain as she shifted her weight. "This old thing? Just something I threw on." Her attempt at lightness couldn't hide her nerves. She'd taken anxiety medication for the first time in years, worried about embarrassing me in front of Nathan's family. Eleanor swept over in a beaded gown that probably cost more than my annual salary. "Sarah, how? Brave of you to attempt walking tonight. Vivian, do make sure there's a chair nearby at all times. We wouldn't want any accidents." My mother's smile faltered, but she straightened her shoulders. "I'll be fine, Mrs. Sterling. Thank you for your concern." "Eleanor, please," she replied, though her tone suggested my mother should call her Your Majesty. "Come, let me introduce you to some of our friends." What followed was 45 minutes of calculated humiliation disguised as hospitality. Eleanor paraded my mother through groups of society women like an exotic exhibit, each introduction more damaging than the last. "This is Sarah Isabel's guardian," she told the lieutenant governor's wife, avoiding the word mother like it burned her tongue. "How lovely," the woman replied, eyeing Mom's cane. "And how long have you been caring for Isabel?" "Since birth," my mother said with dignity. "I'm her mother." An uncomfortable silence followed before Eleanor laughed. "Such a complicated situation. Teen pregnancy, you understand. Medical complications during delivery. That's why we're so proud of Isabel for rising above her circumstances." My mother went rigid. I watched from across the room where Nathan had trapped me in conversation with his Yale buddies, her face draining of color as Eleanor spun her web of lies. Teen pregnancy. My mother had been 25, married to my father for 3 years, teaching elementary school while he served his first tour. "Actually," Mom started, but Eleanor was already moving to the next group, her grip on my mother's good arm just tight enough to prevent escape. This is Isabel's mother," she told the hospital board president. "Such a tragedy raising a child alone while dealing with limitations. We've been discussing whether assisted living might be more appropriate now that Isabel's getting married." "I live independently," my mother said sharply. "I don't need assisted living." "Of course not, dear." Eleanor patted her arm condescendingly. "But we must think about the future. What happens when Isabel has children? We can't expect you to help with grandchildren in your condition." By the time I extracted myself from Nathan's friends, my mother had retreated to a corner table, fumbling with her medication bottle. Her hands shook so badly she couldn't open it. "Let me help," I said, sinking beside her. Maybe I shouldn't come tomorrow, she whispered, tears threatening. Eleanor's right. I'll just embarrass you in front of all those important people. Oh, don't you dare, I said fiercely. You're my mother, the only important person there. Nathan appeared then, champagne in hand. Everything okay, Mom said your mother wasn't feeling well. Your mother told everyone my mom was a teenage mother with complications, I said through gritted teeth. She's been lying about her all night. Nathan's face went carefully neutral. I'm sure she didn't mean it that way. You know how Mom gets when she's nervous. She probably just mixed up the details. Mixed up. She told the hospital board president my mother needs assisted living. Belle, not now. Nathan glanced around nervously. People are watching. Can we discuss this later? When after she humiliates my mother at our wedding too. Nathan's jaw tightened. You're overreacting. Mom's trying to help by controlling the narrative. Your mother's situation is complicated for people to understand. What's complicated about a war widow who raised her daughter alone despite a disability? You know what I mean, Nathan said impatiently. The wheelchair, the medical equipment, it makes people uncomfortable. Mom's just trying to smooth things over. I stared at the man I thought I knew, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time. The only person who seems uncomfortable is your mother. Don't make a scene, he warned, spotting Eleanor approaching. Just get through tonight. Eleanor arrived with her sister Margaret, both women looking like expensive hawks. Is everything all right, Sarah? You look peaked. Perhaps you should go home and rest. Tomorrow will be such a long day. I'm fine, my mother said quietly. Nonsense! You're clearly overwhelmed. This must all be very different from what you're used to. Margaret, didn't your housekeeper drive tonight? I'm sure she could take Sarah home. The final insult sending my mother away like hired help with the hired help. I opened my mouth to protest when Nathan's hand clamped on my arm, a warning squeeze that would leave bruises. That's thoughtful, Mom, he said smoothly, but I'm sure Isabel's mother wants to stay for the toasts. The toasts, where Richard Sterling thanked everyone for welcoming Isabel and her small family into their circle, where Nathan's best man joked about him trading up significantly, where Eleanor spoke about the importance of good breeding while staring directly at my mother. When dinner finally ended, I helped Mom to the bathroom where she took her heart medication with trembling hands. Your father would know what to do, she whispered. He always stood up to bullies. I'm sorry. I'm not stronger, baby. You're the strongest person I know, I said, holding her tight. And tomorrow you'll walk me down that aisle with your head high. Eleanor Sterling doesn't get to dim your light. But as we returned to the ballroom where Nathan laughed with his groomsmen while Eleanor held court among her society friends, I wondered if I was walking into a marriage or a prison sentence. The rehearsal was over, but I had the sinking feeling the real performance was just beginning. Dawn broke through the curtains of the bridal suite at 4:30, finding me already awake. Sleep had been impossible, my mind replaying the rehearsal dinner's cruelties on an endless loop. The Harbor Hotel's luxury suite paid for by the Sterlings felt more like a gilded cage than a sanctuary. By 5, my bridesmaids began arriving. Eleanor had handpicked them all, Nathan's sister Caroline, his 3 female cousins, and his best friend's sister. My actual friends, the ones who'd held my hair during nursing school exam weeks and celebrated my first job with cheap wine and true joy, had been deemed not photogenic enough for the Sterling wedding album. Morning sunshine. Caroline burst in with professional hair and makeup teams in tow. Ready for your transformation. Transformation. The word stuck in my throat like glass. The stylist Eleanor hired immediately began unpacking enough equipment to film a movie, setting up stations throughout the suite. Mrs. Sterling sent very specific instructions. The lead makeup artist announced producing a folder with my face photographed from every angle. She wants a classic Grace Kelly look. We'll need to contour your nose, extend your eyes, and definitely do something about those freckles. I like my freckles, I said quietly. Nathan says they're like constellations. The woman laughed nervously. Well, Mrs. Sterling was quite clear. She said, and I quote, "Make her look like she belongs at this wedding." The hairdresser attacked my natural waves with military precision, ironing them into submission. "Such thick hair," she muttered disapprovingly. "Mrs. Sterling warned me it would be challenging. Don't worry, I'll tame it." My phone buzzed with texts from Nathan, "Can't wait to make you my wife," followed by, "Mom says you're looking gorgeous." He hadn't actually seen me, of course. He was golfing with his groomsmen at the country club. Eleanor's idea to keep the groom relaxed. At 7, my mother arrived. She'd taken 2 buses because Eleanor had forgotten to arrange transportation from South Boston to downtown. Her dress hung perfectly hiding the brace on her weak side, but I could see the exhaustion from navigating public transit with her mobility challenges. Traffic?" Caroline asked with false sympathy. "You should have called an Uber." "I don't mind the bus," Mom said with quiet dignity. "Gives me time to think." She'd brought a small velvet box worn at the corners from age. Inside lay her mother's pearl hairpin, a delicate piece my grandfather had given my grandmother on their wedding morning. "You're something borrowed," she whispered, tears misting her eyes. "Mom wore it, I wore it, and now you." The hairdresser immediately protested. "That wasn't in Mrs. Sterling's approved accessories list. The veil won't sit properly with foreign objects." "It's not a foreign object," I snapped. "It's a family heirloom." "I'll make it work." The woman sighed dramatically, as if I'd asked her to perform surgery. As Mom helped me step into my grandmother's dress, the room fell silent. Even the cynical stylists paused at the sight of hand-sewn lace cascading like water, thousands of seed pearls catching morning light. The dress transformed me, connecting me to generations of women who'd loved fiercely despite hardship. "You look exactly like her," Mom breathed. "Your grandmother. She had that same determined chin, same fierce eyes. Your father would be bursting with pride." Caroline cleared her throat. "It's very vintage. I'm sure the photographer can work with it." Before I could respond, Eleanor burst through the door without knocking. She wore a mother-of-the-groom dress that cost more than most cars, her hair shellacked into submission diamonds, glittering at her throat. Her expression upon seeing me could have curdled milk. "You're actually wearing that dress?" Each word dripped acid. "After everything we discussed." "It's my grandmother's dress, Mrs. Sterling. I told you I'd be wearing it." "And what is that thing in your hair?" She zeroed in on the pearl pin like a missile finding its target. "It looks like something from a garage sale." My mother flinched as if slapped. "It was my mother's, a family tradition." Eleanor turned on her with barely concealed disgust. "I suppose this is your influence." "Well, we'll see what the photographer can do to minimize the situation." "The situation?" I stood, the dress swirling around me. "The situation is that I'm honoring my family's traditions." "Yay! Family traditions!" Eleanor laughed, a sound like breaking crystal. "Dear, your family traditions involve disability payments and public transportation. We're trying to elevate you beyond that." The room temperature plummeted. My bridesmaids suddenly found their phones fascinating. The stylists busied themselves with equipment. Only my mother stood firm, though I saw her good hand trembling. "I should go check on the flowers," Mom said quietly. "Make sure everything's ready." "The florist has it handled." Eleanor dismissed her. "Trained professionals don't need supervision from—" She paused, letting the insult hang unfinished. After Mom left, Eleanor circled me like a general inspecting defective troops. "The photographer will need to be strategic. Keep her out of the formal portraits, obviously. We'll position you with Nathan's family for the important shots. Your mother can have some candids at the reception if she insists on staying that long." "She's my mother. She'll be in every photo I want her in." Eleanor's smile could have cut diamonds. "We'll see about that. Nathan understands the importance of proper documentation. After all, these photos will be in our family archives forever. We can't have future generations wondering about the wheelchair." She swept out, leaving perfume thick as smoke. Caroline patted my shoulder awkwardly. She doesn't mean it personally. Mom just has specific visions for family events. But I knew better. This wasn't about visions or traditions or family archives. This was about erasure, about rewriting my story to fit the Sterling narrative. My grandmother's dress was resistance. My mother's presence, an act of defiance Eleanor couldn't tolerate. The stylists finished their work in silence, transforming me into someone I didn't recognize. The woman in the mirror looked polished, elegant, suitable for a Sterling wedding. But behind the carefully contoured face and tamed hair, my eyes burned with growing fury. Nathan texted again, "Can't wait to see you. Mom says everything looks perfect." Perfect for whom, I wondered, fingering the pearl pin that connected me to women who'd survived worse than Eleanor Sterling's snobbery. My grandmother had worn it through the Depression, my mother through widowhood and disability. I would wear it through whatever came next. The photographer arrived early, immediately conferring with Eleanor in hushed tones. I caught fragments, strategic angles, minimized distractions, focus on the Sterling family. As the morning progressed, the suite filled with champagne and nervous laughter. Eleanor's friends arrived to inspect me, offering backhanded compliments about how clever the vintage dress looked, how brave I was to wear my grandmother's pearls instead of proper jewelry. But when I looked out the window at Boston Harbor, I thought of my father's ship leaving these same waters, my mother standing pregnant and proud to watch him serve. They'd faced real battles, not this petty war over photographs and flower arrangements. The wedding was in 2 hours. 2 hours to decide if I could spend my life fighting Eleanor Sterling for the right to exist as myself, or if love was worth any sacrifice. Looking back, I should have known then. Should have seen Nathan's absence that morning as the sign it was. A man who truly loved me would have been texting from the golf course, eager to hear about my morning, asking about my mother. Instead, his messages came like press releases approved and sanitized by Eleanor. The dress hung perfectly, my grandmother's dreams wrapped around me like armor. But even the strongest armor can't protect against attacks from within. And in 2 hours, I would learn exactly how deep betrayal could cut when it came wrapped in white roses and wedding vows. The church doors stood before me like the gates to another life. St. Bartholomew's Episcopal Church was Eleanor's choice naturally, a soaring cathedral of white marble and stained glass where Sterlings had married for generations. 5,000 white roses transformed the space into a perfumed cloud, their scent so thick I could barely breathe. Crystal chandeliers brought in specially for the occasion cast prismatic light across pews filled with Boston's elite. Ready, sweetheart. My mother stood beside me, leaning carefully on her decorative cane. She'd refused the wheelchair despite the long aisle, determined to walk me down like any other mother. The effort was costing her. I could see it in the tight lines around her mouth, but her smile never wavered. "Ready as I'll ever be," I whispered back. Behind us, Eleanor's chosen bridesmaids fussed with their identical blush dresses, custom designed to complement the Sterling color scheme. Caroline adjusted my veil one last time, careful not to disturb the pearl pin Eleanor had complained about for the past hour. "Remember," Caroline whispered, "small steps, pause for photos at the third pew, and don't look directly at the society photographer. Mother wants candids to look natural." Through the church's glass panels, I glimpsed Nathan at the altar. He stood with military precision in his custom tuxedo, every hair in place, looking like he'd stepped from a magazine spread titled American Dynasty. His groomsmen flanked him in identical formation, all sterling silver cufflinks and practiced smiles. The string quartet Eleanor had hired began the processional. Bach's Air in G floated through the space, technically perfect but emotionally empty, like everything Eleanor touched. The bridesmaids began their measured walk, each step choreographed during yesterday's rehearsal. "This is it," Mom murmured. "Your father would be so proud, baby. You look like every dream he had for you." The wedding coordinator, another Eleanor selection, gestured frantically. Our recue. The massive doors swung open, revealing 200 faces turned expectantly toward us. The aisle stretched endlessly white, runner pristine as fresh snow rose petals scattered with mathematical precision. First step. Mom's grip tightened on my arm, her weakness on the left side making her lean heavily, but she kept her head high, eyes forward, dignity intact, despite everything Eleanor had put her through. Second step. I heard the whispers starting society matrons behind raised programs. Is that the mother? The disabled one? Eleanor must be mortified. So brave of them to include her. Third step. The photographer Eleanor had hired was actively avoiding shots that would include my mother positioning himself for angles that would crop her out. But the videographer, my mother's friend had offered to hire as a gift, was capturing everything, though Eleanor didn't know about that yet. As we processed slowly down the aisle, I caught fragments of Eleanor's running commentary to her sister Margaret and Mrs. Wellington from the country club. She wasn't even trying to whisper her voice, carrying in that practiced way of women who'd never been told to quiet down. Look at her struggling, Eleanor murmured. I offered a wheelchair, but pride, you know. Such a shame, Margaret replied, the whole left side just drooping. We've discussed care facilities, Eleanor continued, after the wedding, of course. My blood began to boil, but Mom squeezed my arm. Eyes forward, she whispered. Don't give her the satisfaction. Halfway down the aisle, the whispers grew louder. Eleanor had positioned herself in the front row where mothers belonged, but she was turned completely around, addressing her audience, rather than watching her son's bride approach. The dress is a disaster, of course, she said to Mrs. Pemberton. Vintage, she calls it. I call it moth-eaten. But what can you expect from people who shop at thrift stores? Nathan stood at the altar, and for a moment I thought he couldn't hear his mother. Then I saw his jaw tighten, his eyes flick toward her with what looked like warning. But he didn't move, didn't speak. Just stood there in his perfect tuxedo waiting for his perfect wedding to proceed. 3/4 of the way down, my mother was struggling now, her breathing labored. The cane wasn't enough support for this distance, and I could feel her trembling with the effort of each step, but she wouldn't stop, wouldn't accept defeat in front of Eleanor Sterling. Almost there, I whispered. You're doing amazingly. That's when Eleanor delivered the killing blow. She leaned toward Mrs. Wellington, her voice pitched to carry over the quartet. Look at her in that chair. My mother wasn't in a chair. She was walking, fighting for every step, showing more strength than Eleanor would ever possess. That's not a mother, Eleanor continued, her tone dripping false pity. That's a mistaken address. The words hit like physical blows. I felt my mother stumble, her grip on my arm going slack. The church fell silent, except for the quartet who played on oblivious. 200 guests had heard every word, some gasping, others leaning forward as if watching a car accident. Time slowed. I turned toward Nathan, needing him to say something, do something, be the man I thought I'd fallen in love with. Our eyes met across the altar's expanse. And he laughed. Not a loud laugh, but unmistakable. A chuckle he tried to turn into a cough, hand rising to cover his mouth, but I saw it the way his shoulders shook, the amusement in his eyes before he caught himself. His mother's cruelty was funny to him. My mother's humiliation was entertainment. The minister was speaking something about gathering together, but all I could hear was a laugh echoing in my skull. My mother stood beside me, tears rolling silently down her cheeks, her whole body shaking with the effort of remaining upright after such a public blow. Dearly beloved, the minister intoned, we are gathered here today to witness the union of Nathan and Isabel. But we weren't beloved, not all of us. Some of us were mistakes in dresses, sources of shame, things to be hidden and mocked and erased from family photos. The minister reached the part about objections, that archaic tradition nobody ever expected to matter. If anyone knows any reason why these two should not be joined in holy matrimony, speak now or forever. Hold your peace." The silence stretched heavy with expectation. This was it, the moment where I could speak or surrender, fight or fold, choose my mother, or choose the man who'd laughed at her pain. I looked at Nathan, still smirking slightly, already reaching for my hand. I looked at Eleanor's satisfaction written across her face like victory. I looked at my mother, broken, but still standing, the strongest woman I'd ever known. And I knew what I had to do. "I object." My voice rang clear through the cathedral, cutting through the minister's words like a sword through silk. The collective gasp from 200 guests created a sound wave that seemed to shake the rose petals from their arrangements. Nathan's hand reaching for mine froze midair. "Belle, what are you doing?" His whisper was sharp, urgent, but I was already turning away from him. "I object," I repeated louder this time. The wireless microphone clipped to my dress carried every word to the farthest corners of the church. "I object to marrying into a family that thinks cruelty is acceptable. I object to Eleanor Sterling calling my mother a mistaken address when she's the strongest woman I know." Eleanor shot up from her pew like a jack-in-the-box, her face cycling through shades of red I didn't know existed. "How dare you? This is ridiculous. Nathan, control your bride." But I was nobody's to control anymore. Control me." I laughed, actually laughed, the sound bouncing off stained glass windows depicting saints who died for their beliefs. "Like you've been trying to control me for months. Etiquette classes to fix my accent, stylists to fix my appearance, lies to fix my history." The minister stepped back, clearly unsure of the protocol for a self-objecting bride. Nathan lunged forward, grabbing my wrist. "Belle, stop this. You're being hysterical." "I'm being honest." I yanked free my grandmother's dress, swirling as I faced the congregation. Everyone here heard what Eleanor said about my mother. Everyone heard Nathan laugh. "I didn't laugh," Nathan protested, but his lie fell flat in a room full of witnesses. "My mother," I continued, voice strengthening with each word, "raised me alone after my father died serving this country. 3 purple hearts and a bronze star sit on our mantle, but Eleanor told people my mother was a teenage pregnancy tragedy. My mother worked 3 jobs while learning to function with partial paralysis, but Eleanor called her a burden. My mother is worth more than everyone in your country club combined, and you called her a mistake." I reached up and pulled off my veil, the pearl pin my mother had given me glinting in the light. This pin belonged to my grandmother, who worked in factories during the Depression to buy food. This dress was sewn by hands that knew real labor, not charity luncheons and tennis matches. These are the women who made me, and I'm proud of every single one of them. Eleanor's sister Margaret tried to block my path as I stepped down from the altar. "You ungrateful little nothing! Do you have any idea what you're throwing away?" "Yes," I said simply, "I'm throwing away the chance to spend my life apologizing for who I am." The engagement ring came off easily, as if it had been waiting for this moment. The sound it made hitting the marble floor echoed like a gunshot. 3 carats of promises that came with too high a price. "This wedding is over," I announced, then turned to my mother. "Let's go home, Mom." She was crying, but her eyes shone with something that looked like pride. "Are you sure, baby?" "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." Nathan's composure finally cracked. "You can't do this. Do you know how much this wedding cost? What people will say? You'll never get another chance like this." "Good," I said. "I don't want another chance like this." Eleanor screamed something about deposits and social humiliation. Richard Sterling threatened lawsuits, his face purple with rage. Nathan switched between begging and threatening, his perfect image fracturing like a mirror hit by a hammer. But I was already walking away, my arm linked with my mother's, supporting her weight as she'd supported me my whole life. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, some whispering, others openly gaping. That's when unexpected allies emerged from the chaos. Dr. Patricia Hamilton, chief of pediatrics at my hospital, stepped into the aisle. That was the bravest thing I've ever seen, Isabel. Your mother raised an extraordinary daughter. Behind her, Sarah Chen from accounting nodded fiercely. About time someone stood up to these people. Even more shocking, Nathan's cousin Emma approached, pulling off her bridesmaid sash. I've watched Aunt Eleanor bully people for 20 years. Thank you for finally saying what we all think. Two more of Nathan's cousins followed along with several Sterling Industries employees who'd been commanded to attend. The exodus was small but significant, a crack in the Sterling facade. "You'll regret this," Eleanor shrieked. "I'll destroy you. No one walks away from the Sterling family." My mother, tiny beside Eleanor's designer height, straightened her spine. Despite her exhaustion, despite the tears, she found her voice. "My daughter just chose dignity over money, something you wouldn't understand." We made it to the church doors as the organist, clearly confused, began playing the recessional march. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. I was recessing all right, just not the way Eleanor had planned. Outside, the October air hit like freedom. The wedding photographer chased us, Eleanor's shouts fading behind the closing doors. "Wait, I'm supposed to get exit photos." "Send them to Eleanor," I called back. "She can Photoshop in whatever bride she wanted instead of me." In the parking lot, more surprises waited. The valet, a young guy named Marcus, who'd always been kind when I'd visited the country club, handed me my keys with a grin. "That was epic, Miss Thompson. My mom works in their kitchen. She says it's about time someone put Mrs. Sterling in her place." Dr. Hamilton helped my mother into her car while her husband loaded the wheelchair. "Take care of each other," she said quietly. "And Isabel, don't come to work Monday. You're going to need time to deal with whatever Eleanor throws next." As we drove away, I glimpsed the scene in my rearview mirror. Nathan standing on the church steps in his perfect tuxedo, looking lost. Eleanor beside him, gesticulating wildly at guests streaming out early. Richard on his phone, probably calling lawyers. The Sterling Empire's perfect facade cracked beyond repair. My phone exploded with messages, but I turned it off. Whatever came next could wait. Right now, I had my mother beside me, my grandmother's dress still intact, and my self-respect rescued from the altar of social climbing. "I'm proud of you, baby," Mom whispered as we turned onto the highway. "Your father would be too." "I love you, Mom. I'm sorry I let it get this far." Don't apologize for hoping people could be better than they are. That's not weakness, that's strength. As Boston's skyline faded behind us, I realized the wedding might be over, but the real fight was just beginning. Eleanor Sterling didn't make idle threats, but for the first time in months, I felt like myself again. Isabel Thompson, daughter of Sarah and James, granddaughter of women who'd survived worse than social scandal. The Sterlings could keep their money, their club, their perfect world. I had something worth more, the knowledge that when tested, I'd chosen love over luxury, truth over transformation, my mother over their acceptance. It was the best wedding gift I could have given myself. Within 3 hours, the video went viral. I discovered this when Anna, my best friend who'd been banned from the wedding party for being too ethnic, according to Eleanor, called me 15 times in rapid succession. Mom and I had taken refuge in her small apartment, still in our wedding clothes, drinking tea from chipped mugs that held more warmth than all the Sterling china combined. "Check your phone," Anna demanded when I finally answered. "Actually, don't. Come to my place. Bring your mom. You're going to need support for this." 20 minutes later, we sat in Anna's living room, watching my life explode across social media. Someone at the wedding, a guest I didn't recognize, had filmed my entire objection speech on their phone. The video, tagged mistaken address, already had 200,000 views and climbing. "Look at the comments." Anna scrolled through her laptop. "People are calling you a hero. Eleanor's getting destroyed in the court of public opinion." The comments ranged from supportive to savage. "That mother-in-law is pure evil. Good for the bride." Anyone else noticed the groom laughing at his mom's cruelty? Money can't buy class. Eleanor Sterling is proof. But Eleanor's machine was already mobilizing. Within hours, a carefully crafted story appeared on the Boston Globe Society page, painting me as an unstable gold digger who'd planned the dramatic exit for attention. Isabel Thompson, a nurse from South Boston, shocked guests at what was meant to be the social event of the season. The article began. Sources close to the Sterling family report that Ms. Thompson had shown signs of mental instability in recent weeks, making increasingly erratic demands. Nathan had given them a quote, "I'm devastated but relieved." Looking back, there were warning signs. Isabel became obsessed with her family's past, unable to accept the generous efforts my family made to welcome her into our world. I hope she gets the help she needs. That lying piece of garbage, Anna snarled. Mental instability. The only thing unstable was your decision to date him in the first place. My phone, which I'd finally turned back on, showed 847 missed calls. Texts flooded in so fast the screen froze. Everyone from distant relatives to coworkers to college acquaintances wanted to know what had happened, if I was okay, if the video was real. Then came the threats. Eleanor didn't text directly, of course. She had lawyers for that. The first message arrived at 6 p.m. Ms. Thompson, you are hereby notified that any defamatory statements regarding the Sterling family will result in legal action. Additionally, you have 48 hours to vacate the premises at 1247 Commonwealth Avenue, as your name was never on the lease. All joint financial accounts have been frozen pending resolution of wedding expenses you are legally obligated to reimburse. Nathan had drained our joint savings that same afternoon. $8,000 I'd saved for our future gone. The apartment we'd shared for 6 months picked out together, decorated with dreams of our life ahead. His name alone on the lease, a detail I'd never questioned because I trusted him. Don't worry about money, Mom said firmly. You can stay with me as long as you need. But her apartment was one bedroom, barely accessible for her wheelchair when she needed it. And I knew her finances, knew she skipped medications sometimes to save money, knew the Sterling revenge would hurt her too. That's when the real retaliation began. Monday morning, HR called me into a meeting. The hospital administrator, a man who golfed with Richard Sterling, sat behind his desk looking professionally concerned. Isabel, we've received some troubling complaints about your professionalism. Let me guess, I said flatly. Anonymous complaints that arrived right after I left Nathan Sterling at the altar. He shifted uncomfortably. The timing is unfortunate, but we must investigate all concerns. You're suspended with pay pending review. I'm sure you understand. I understood perfectly. The Sterlings donated millions to the hospital. They owned board members like playing cards. My career was a collateral damage in Eleanor's war. The local news picked up the story that evening. They ran a segment on wedding drama in high society, complete with Eleanor's PR team's spin. They interviewed wedding vendors who'd mysteriously remembered me as difficult and demanding, despite emails I had proving the opposite. But then the narrative shifted. The photographer Eleanor had hired, a young woman named Meredith, called me Tuesday night. I can't stay quiet anymore, she said. I have all of Eleanor's emails demanding I minimize the disabled woman's presence. She actually wrote that, in writing, multiple times. The wedding planner, Vivian, cracked next. Turns out Eleanor had been threatening her business for years, demanding free services and upgrades under threat of social destruction. She had recordings of Eleanor referring to my family as charity cases and genetic inferiors. The caterer revealed Eleanor had ordered a separate, cheaper menu for my 25 guests. Serve them the house wine, she'd instructed. They won't know the difference. Each revelation added fuel to the social media firestorm. Mistaken address evolved into Sterling scandal. People who'd suffered Eleanor's casual cruelty for years found courage to speak up. Nathan tried damage control Wednesday night, showing up at Anna's apartment where I was hiding, Security camera footage would later show him pounding on the door, alternating between apologies and threats. "Belle, please, we can work this out. Just tell them you were overwhelmed. Mom will forgive you if you apologize publicly." When I didn't answer, his true colors emerged. "You're nothing without me, a nobody nurse from Southie. You'll be lucky to work at a clinic after we're done with you." Anna filmed it all through the peephole. That video went viral too. By Thursday, protesters gathered outside Sterling Industries with signs reading, "Money can't buy class," and "We stand with Isabel." Local disability rights organizations condemned Eleanor's comments. Veterans groups defended my mother's honor. The story had transcended gossip, becoming a flashpoint for discussions about class disability, discrimination, and the price of social climbing. But the Sterlings weren't done. Thursday night, they played their cruelest card yet. A man in a cheap suit appeared at my mother's door, claiming to be from the State Disability Office. "We've received a complaint about potential benefits fraud," he announced. "Someone reported that Sarah Thompson exaggerated her disabilities to receive unauthorized payments." My mother, already fragile from the week's stress, nearly collapsed. 25 years of honest struggle of working despite pain of raising me alone, and now they were attacking her lifeline. That's when I decided enough was enough. They could come after me, destroy my career, drain my savings, but threatening my mother's survival, that crossed every line. "We're fighting back," I told Anna that night. "Get me every employment lawyer you know. Call that journalist who's been leaving messages. It's time to show Boston who the Sterling family really is." The war was escalating, but I was no longer the naive girl who'd believed love conquered all. I was my mother's daughter, my grandmother's legacy, and Sterling women, the real ones who'd earned the name through survival, not marriage. We didn't break. We fought back. By Friday morning, mistaken address had evolved into something bigger than my canceled wedding. The hashtag had been used over 1 million times, with people sharing their own stories of discrimination, classism, and family cruelty. What started as my personal crisis had become a movement. Anna set up a command center in her apartment. Her paralegal experience proved invaluable as we documented every piece of evidence. Her dining table disappeared under boxes of printed emails, recordings on flash drives, and notebooks filled with witness statements. Holy hell," she breathed, reading through the latest batch of messages. "Isabel, you need to see this." The email was from Jennifer Walsh, and the name hit me like a slap. Nathan's ex-fiancée, the one who disappeared from Boston society 3 years ago after breaking their engagement. Everyone said she'd had a nervous breakdown. Eleanor had spun it as, "Poor Jennifer just wasn't equipped for our lifestyle." "I've been following your story," Jennifer had written. "What happened to you happened to me first. I signed an NDA, but I've consulted a lawyer. Your public stand may have given me grounds to break it. They destroyed my life because my brother has autism. Eleanor called him defective merchandise and demanded I cut him from my life. When I refused, they systematically ruined me. I have recordings, I have emails, I kept everything despite their threats. It's time for the truth." We met Jennifer that afternoon in a coffee shop in Cambridge, far from Sterling territory. She looked different from the society photos I'd seen. Her designer clothes replaced with simple jeans and a sweater. But her eyes blazed with 3 years of suppressed rage. "They did a number on you," she said, studying my face. "Same playbook. Isolate, transform, then destroy when you don't comply. How far did they get?" I told her everything. The etiquette classes, the speech coaching, the attempts to hide my mother. Jennifer nodded knowingly at each revelation. "Eleanor measured me for a wedding dress without asking," she said quietly. "Scheduled fittings for a gown I'd never seen. When I protested, Nathan said I was being difficult. Sound familiar?" She pulled out a tablet, files organized with meticulous care. 3 years I've waited for someone else to stand up to them. Here's Eleanor asking me to sign a prenup that would have given me nothing if I maintained contact with my defective brother. Here's Nathan's father offering my dad a bribe to convince me to comply. And here, she played an audio recording, Eleanor's voice crystal clear. Jennifer, dear, you must understand. The Sterling bloodline has been carefully cultivated for generations. We can't risk contamination from inferior genetics. Your brother's condition is unfortunate, but imagine if it appeared in your children, Nathan's children, it would destroy everything we've built. If you love my son, you'll make the right choice. She actually said contamination. I breathed, like your brother was a disease. That's not the worst part. Jennifer pulled up another file. After I refused and broke the engagement, they destroyed my father's business. Suddenly, all his contracts were canceled. Loans were called in. He went from successful contractor to bankrupt in 6 months. They made it look like bad business decisions, but I have the paper trail. Richard Sterling orchestrated all of it. The story she told over the next 2 hours was systematic destruction. Her social media hacked and filled with embarrassing posts. Rumors spread about drug abuse and mental instability. Job offers mysteriously withdrawn after background checks. Jennifer had been forced to leave Boston entirely, starting over in California, under a cloud of manufactured scandal. But you fought back, she said, eyes bright with unshed tears. You stood up in that church and told the truth. Do you know what that means to those of us as they've crushed? That evening, Jennifer and I recorded a joint interview with Marcus Chen, the investigative journalist who'd been following the Sterling family's business practices. What had started as a social scandal was becoming a criminal investigation. The Sterling pattern is clear, so Marcus explained after reviewing Jennifer's evidence. They identify targets, usually women marrying, into the family who don't meet their standards. They attempt transformation. When that fails, they use their wealth and connections to destroy not just the individual, but their entire family. It's witness intimidation, conspiracy, and fraud rolled into one. The interview aired on local news that night, then got picked up nationally. Sterling scandal trended worldwide. More victims emerged from the shadows. There was David, a former CFO who'd questioned irregularities in Sterling Industries books. He'd been framed for embezzlement, spent 2 years fighting charges before being cleared, his career destroyed. Maria, a maid who'd refused Eleanor's orders to spy on guests' conversations. She'd been accused of theft, arrested at her next job. The charges dropped only after she'd spent her savings on legal fees. Dr. Amanda Price, who dated Nathan's brother briefly when she'd ended things. Suddenly, her medical license was under review for anonymous complaints. She'd kept her license, but lost her hospital position. Each story revealed the same pattern: across the Sterlings lose everything. Saturday brought unexpected support. Dr. Patricia Hamilton held a press conference at the hospital, flanked by the entire pediatric nursing staff. Isabel Thompson is one of the finest nurses I've worked with in 30 years, she declared. These anonymous complaints appeared only after she refused to tolerate discrimination against her disabled mother. This hospital should be defending her, not suspending her for standing up to bigotry. The nurses' union voted to support me. Patients' families created a petition demanding my reinstatement. One mother spoke to reporters about how I'd stayed 16 hours past my shift when her daughter was scared before surgery. Another shared how I'd learned sign language to communicate with her deaf son. But the most powerful moment came from an unexpected source. Nathan's cousin, Emma, the bridesmaid who'd walked out of the wedding, went on social media with her own video. My family is threatening me for this, but I can't stay quiet anymore. I've watched Aunt Eleanor destroy people my whole life. She made my sister develop an eating disorder with her comments about weight. She drove my best friend to attempt suicide with her bullying. The family money comes from decades of stepping on others. Isabel didn't ruin a wedding. She exposed a dynasty built on cruelty. By Sunday, the Sterling Empire was in full crisis mode. Business partners distanced themselves. The country club quietly suggested they take a temporary leave of absence. 3 board members of Sterling Industries resigned. The state attorney general announced an investigation into their business practices. Nathan made one last desperate attempt appearing on a morning talk show, but his polished facade cracked under questioning. When asked about the recording of him threatening me, he stammered excuses. When confronted with Jennifer's evidence, he tried to deflect. The interview became another viral disaster, his true nature exposed without Eleanor there to manage his image. That night, Mom and I sat in her tiny kitchen, exhausted but oddly hopeful. The wedding that wasn't had become something bigger than either of us imagined. "I'm sorry you lost Nathan," she said quietly. "I know you loved him." "I loved who I thought he was," I corrected, "but that person never existed. He was just another Sterling creation as fake as their charity work." My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I almost deleted it, then recognized the area code, California. The message was simple. "Thank you for being braver than I was. You didn't just save yourself, you saved the next girl and the next, Jennifer." Outside, Boston glittered in the darkness. Somewhere in those lights, the Sterling family was plotting their next move, but for the first time since meeting Nathan, I wasn't afraid. They'd already done their worst, and I was still standing. The girl who tried to transform herself to fit their world was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, someone who understood that real class couldn't be bought, taught, or faked. It came from character, from choosing truth over comfort, from defending those who couldn't defend themselves. Eleanor Sterling had been right about one thing. I wasn't the right fit for their family. Thank God for that. Monday morning arrived with the force of a hurricane. I woke in my childhood bedroom, the walls still covered with nursing school achievement certificates and photos of Dad in uniform. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd gone from a luxury apartment overlooking the Charles River to my mother's cramped one-bedroom in Southie, sleeping on a twin bed I'd outgrown at 16. The first blow came at 7 a.m. My bank app showed a balance of $12.37. Nathan hadn't just drained our joint savings. He'd somehow convinced the bank to freeze my personal checking account, claiming potential fraud related to misappropriated wedding funds. "How is that even legal?" I asked Anna over the phone, staring at the screen in disbelief. "It's not," she said grimly, "but the Sterlings have lawyers who know every loophole. We need to get you representation immediately." The second hit arrived by courier at 8. A thick envelope filled with legal documents, each one more threatening than the last. The Sterling family was suing me for breach of promise, intentional infliction of emotional distress, defamation, and recovery of wedding expenses totaling $387,000. $300,000! Mom gasped, reading over my shoulder. The wedding didn't happen. But Eleanor had been clever. Every contract included clauses about cancellation. The flowers alone carried a $50,000 penalty. The venue, the caterers, the musicians, all had ironclad agreements that made me liable for last-minute changes. "I never signed these contracts," I protested to Anna. "Eleanor handled everything." "Check page 17, Anna said wearily. "I bet there's a signature line." There was. Nathan had forged my signature on every document, probably while I was distracted with dress fittings or his false affections. The handwriting was close enough to pass casual inspection. By noon, the situation worsened. The hospital's HR department called to inform me that my suspension was now unpaid, pending a comprehensive review that could take several months. My health insurance would terminate at month's end. The implication was clear: resign quietly or face a prolonged battle that would destroy my nursing career. "They can't do this," Dr. Hamilton said when I called her. "I filed complaints with the board, but Richard Sterling plays golf with the chairman. We need to go public with this retaliation." But going public required resources I didn't have. Lawyers wanted retainers I couldn't afford. The few who offered to work on contingency backed out after mysterious phone calls about conflicts of interest. That's when desperation drove me to an unexpected ally. Marcus Chen, the investigative journalist, had left 17 messages. When I finally called him back, his first words surprised me. "Don't say anything specific on this line," he warned. "The Sterlings have been known to hire private investigators. Can you meet me at the public library in an hour South End branch 3rd floor local history section?" The library meeting felt like something from a spy novel. Marcus had chosen the most deserted corner, surrounded by dusty volumes nobody read anymore. He looked haggard, like he hadn't slept in days. "I've been investigating the Sterling family for 3 years," he began without preamble. "What they're doing to you. It's pattern behavior, but you're the first victim to fight back publicly. That makes you valuable and dangerous." He pulled out a laptop, angling it so no one could see the screen. "I've tracked 23 cases of Sterling retaliation over 2 decades. Business rivals destroyed employees, silenced romantic partners erased. But here's what they don't want anyone to know. Their empire is built on fraud." The documents he showed me were devastating. Sterling Industries had been cooking books for years, inflating property values, bribing inspectors, threatening whistleblowers. The charity foundation Eleanor ran was a tax shelter that donated less than 2% to actual causes. Most funds cycled back to Sterling-owned businesses through shell companies. "Jennifer Walsh's evidence opened doors," Marcus explained. "Her father's bankruptcy, Richard Sterling orchestrated it through illegal stock manipulation. I have the emails, the trading records, everything. But I need more recent evidence to make it stick." "What kind of evidence?" "Nathan made a mistake threatening you on camera at your friend's apartment. He implicated himself in the conspiracy. But I need documentation of the financial manipulation, the forged signatures, the frozen accounts. Everything they're doing to you now is criminal conspiracy." That afternoon, energized by possibility, I made a decision that would change everything. I called Nathan. He answered on the first ring, eager. "Belle, thank God. I knew you'd come to your senses." "I want to meet," I said carefully, "to discuss terms." "Terms," his voice cooled. "You mean an apology? Mother requires a public statement taking full responsibility." "I mean terms for my silence," I interrupted, "about everything, including the things you told me about your father's business, things I'm sure the FBI would find interesting." The silence stretched so long I thought he'd hung up. Then, "The Ritz Bar, 7 tonight. Come alone." I didn't go alone. Anna and Marcus waited in the lobby while I wore a wire provided by Marcus's FBI contact. Yes, the FBI was already investigating, had been for months. My wedding disaster had simply accelerated their timeline. Nathan showed up looking rough. His perfect styling was gone, replaced by stubble and wrinkled clothes. He'd been drinking already, whiskey heavy on his breath. "You destroyed everything," he started. "My reputation, my family's standing, our entire future." "Your mother destroyed everything when she called my mother a mistake," I countered. "You destroyed it when you laughed." "It was nervous laughter," he protested. "I was shocked." "No, Nathan, you thought it was funny. Just like you thought it was funny when she made the waitress at the club cry, when she had that janitor fired for using the wrong elevator, when she destroyed Jennifer for loving her brother." Nathan's face went white. "How do you know about Jennifer?" "She kept everything, Nathan. Every email, every recording, every threat. Did you know your dad offered her father $100,000 to convince her to abandon her autistic brother? Did you know your mother had her apartment broken into to steal evidence?" "That's not Jennifer was unstable." "Stop lying." My voice carried enough to turn heads. I lowered it, leaning forward. "I know about all of it. The fake charity, the bribed inspectors, the way your father destroyed Jennifer's dad using insider information. I know because you told me, remember. All those nights you had too much wine and wanted to impress me with how powerful your family was. Nathan grabbed my wrist. What do you want? I want my money back. I want the lawsuits dropped. I want you to leave my mother alone. And I want a written statement that I left you at the altar because of your family's discrimination, not mental instability. Mother will never agree to that. Then Mother can explain to the FBI why Sterling Industries has been laundering money through her charity for 2 decades. It was a guess, but Marcus's research suggested it. Nathan's reaction confirmed everything. He released my wrist like it burned, stumbling back. You don't understand, he whispered. If you go after Mother, she'll destroy more than your career. She knows judges, politicians, people who make bodies disappear. Is that a threat, Nathan? Because you should know I'm recording this. The look of horror on his face would have been satisfying if it wasn't so pathetic. The golden boy raised in privilege, realizing his words were evidence. I loved you, he said brokenly. I was going to give you everything. You were going to give me a cage, I corrected, with golden bars and a lifetime of apologizing for existing. Your mother made me choose between you and my dignity. That's not love, Nathan. That's ownership. I stood to leave, then paused. Tell Eleanor she has 48 hours to drop the lawsuits and return my money. After that, Marcus Chen gets everything, and I mean everything, including the recording of you from 3 months ago bragging about how your dad bribed the zoning commissioner for the Seaport project. Nathan aged 10 years and 10 seconds. I was drunk. You said you deleted that. I lied. I hadn't actually. But he'd been drunk so many times, shared so many secrets, he couldn't be sure. 48 hours, Nathan. Choose wisely. I left him there, slumped in his chair, the weight of his family's sins finally crushing the perfect image. In the lobby, Anna hugged me tight while Marcus listened to the recording, grinning like Christmas came early. That bit about the zoning commissioner, he said. Was that real? Every word. Nathan liked to brag when he drank. I started taking notes after the 3rd time he mentioned bribing city officials like it was normal dinner conversation. You have notes. Marcus's eyes lit up. Dated notes? I smiled for the first time in days. 3 notebooks full, hidden in my mother's apartment, wrapped in plastic in the toilet tank. Eleanor's investigators already searched the place. They never thought to check there. That night, while the Sterling family held an emergency meeting about my ultimatum, I sat with Mom watching the city lights twinkle beyond our small window. Tomorrow would bring new battles, but for the first time since that disastrous rehearsal dinner, I felt like I had weapons of my own. Your father would be proud, Mom said softly, standing up to bullies, protecting the innocent. You're fighting the good fight, baby. I learned from the best, I said, squeezing her hand. They made one mistake, Mom. They threatened you. Nobody threatens my family and walks away clean. The financial fallout was far from over, but the Sterling Empire, built on generations of crushing anyone who challenged them, had finally met an opponent they couldn't by bribe or break. The war was entering its final phase, and I intended to win. Tuesday morning brought an unexpected visitor to my mother's apartment. At 7 a.m., a sharp knock interrupted our coffee. Through the peephole, I saw a woman in a conservative suit holding federal credentials. Ms. Thompson, Special Agent Sarah Martinez, FBI Financial Crimes Division. We need to talk about the Sterling family. My mother gripped my hand as I opened the door. Agent Martinez was younger than I'd expected, with keen eyes that missed nothing as she surveyed our modest living room. I apologize for the early hour, she said, settling onto our worn couch, but Marcus Chen shared your recorded conversation with Nathan Sterling. Combined with the evidence we've been gathering, we believe you could be a key witness in our investigation. How long have you been investigating them? I asked, my mind racing. 3 years ever since a whistleblower at Sterling Industries died in a suspicious car accident. He'd been about to testify about fraudulent property valuations. We could never prove murder, but the pattern of intimidation was clear. She pulled out a tablet showing me a complex web of connections. The Sterling Empire is like an octopus. Real estate, politics, charity foundations, even judges. But you've given us something we've never had before, an inside view and a paper trail. The notebooks, Mom said quietly. Nathan's drunken confessions. Agent Martinez leaned forward. Mr. Chen mentioned you have contemporaneous notes of Nathan Sterling discussing criminal activities. If those notes can be verified, they could be the key to taking down the entire organization. I retrieved the notebooks from their hiding spot, 3 spiral-bound journals wrapped in plastic. Each entry dated each conversation documented in detail. Nathan's wine-soaked boasts about his family's power had seemed like ego at the time. Now they read like criminal confessions. March 15th. I read from one entry. Nathan upset about seaport deal delays. Says his father had to pay harbor commissioner extra $100,000 to expedite permits. Laughed about how commissioner's daughter got into Harvard next week. Called it mutual benefit. Agent Martinez's eyes sharpened. The harbor commissioner's daughter did get into Harvard that week, despite below-average grades. We suspected a connection but couldn't prove it. For 2 hours we went through the notebooks. Each entry revealed another piece of the Sterling corruption puzzle. Judges who dismissed cases after their mortgages mysteriously disappeared. City councilors who voted for Sterling projects after their children received scholarships. Business rivals who suffered accidents after challenging Sterling developments. This is enough for warrants, Agent Martinez said finally. But I need to warn you, once we move, the Sterlings will know you're cooperating. They'll escalate. They've already taken everything, I said. My job, my savings, my reputation, what's left? Your safety, she said quietly. We can offer protection, but it would mean relocating temporarily, both of you. Before I could respond, my phone exploded with notifications. The 48-hour deadline I'd given Nathan wasn't up, but the Sterlings had chosen offense over compliance. A news alert showed Eleanor at a press conference, tears streaming down her perfectly made-up face. My son is heartbroken, she sobbed to the cameras. We tried to help this girl rise above her circumstances, but mental illness and greed corrupted her. Now she's making wild accusations trying to extort our family. We've been forced to seek restraining orders for our protection. Unbelievable, Mom muttered. She's playing victim. But Eleanor wasn't done. She produced documents, medical records that looked official. Isabel Thompson has a history of psychological problems. These records from her college years show treatment for delusions and paranoid thinking. We should have known better than to let Nathan get involved with someone so troubled. I stared at the screen in shock. Those are fake. I've never seen a therapist for delusions. I went to counseling after Dad died, but that was grief support when I was 3. Agent Martinez was already on her phone. They've crossed into federal territory now. Forging medical documents is a felony. She paused, listening. I need to go. My team is moving up our timeline. Can you get somewhere safe? Before we could answer, Anna burst through the door without knocking. They're here, Sterling security, at least 6 cars. Mrs. Chen saw them from her window. They're surrounding the building. Through the window, I could see black SUVs blocking the street. Men in suits positioned at every exit. Not quite threatening enough for police intervention, but the message was clear: we were trapped. They can't do this, Mom said, but her voice shook. This is America. We have rights. Rights don't matter when they own the system, Anna said grimly. But I called my contacts at the news stations. Camera crews are on their way. Let's see how Sterling security likes being filmed. The standoff lasted 3 hours. Sterling security claimed they were protecting the building from potential threats to residents. The arriving news crews filmed everything, especially when residents complained about being unable to leave for work. The optics were terrible for the Sterlings. their hired muscle essentially holding a disabled woman and her daughter hostage. During the siege, my phone rang constantly, reporters wanting statements, friends offering support, then a call that changed everything. Isabel, the voice was elderly but strong. This is Margaret Wellington. You might remember me from your wedding. I remembered. Eleanor's country club friend who'd heard the mistake in a dress comment. I need to speak with you, she continued. What Eleanor did was unconscionable. I've been complicit in her cruelties through silence for too long. I have information that might help you. We agreed to meet that evening, assuming I could leave my building. But Margaret had one more surprise. I'm sending my car service to collect you. Let's see Sterling Security try to stop a Wellington vehicle. An hour later, a Bentley with diplomatic plates arrived. The driver, a former Secret Service agent, simply smiled at the Sterling security team. They parted like the Red Sea, unwilling to create an international incident by blocking someone with Margaret Wellington's connections. At Margaret's Beacon Hill mansion, I found an unexpected gathering. 5 women, all Eleanor's supposed friends, sat in the parlor looking determined. We've all been victims of Eleanor Sterling, Margaret began, too afraid to speak out alone, but your courage at that wedding inspired us. One by one, they shared their stories. Patricia's sister driven to bankruptcy after refusing a Sterling business deal. Dorothy's nephew falsely accused of assault after dating Nathan before he met me. Linda's husband a judge who'd been blackmailed into favorable rulings for Sterling Industries. We kept quiet out of fear, Patricia said, but watching you stand up to her, knowing what it would cost you, we can't be cowards anymore. They'd brought evidence, documents, recordings, even video from society events showing Eleanor's pattern of cruelty and corruption. Margaret had been secretly recording Eleanor for years initially for self-protection, now for justice. There's more, Margaret said quietly. The car accident that killed the Sterling Industries whistleblower Eleanor was at the country club that night, very drunk, bragging about handling the problem. She said Richard knew someone who could make it look accidental. The room went silent. We'd crossed from financial crimes into potential murder conspiracy. That evening, Agent Martinez met us at a secure location. The evidence from the society women combined with my notebooks and Jennifer's documentation painted a picture of criminal enterprise spanning decades. We're raiding Sterling Industries tomorrow morning, she announced. Simultaneous warrants for the business, the charity, and their homes. It's going to be the biggest financial crimes bust in Boston history. What about us? Mom asked. The security, the threats? We've arranged protective custody starting tonight. Hotel security detail the works. This is about to get very ugly and the Sterlings won't go down without fighting. As we packed essential items under agent supervision, I thought about the journey from that fairy tale proposal to this moment. 6 months ago, I'd have given anything to join the Sterling family. Now I was helping destroy it. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. When I opened it, my blood ran cold. You think you've won? Your mother's medical records are interesting reading. Shame if her disability benefits were investigated for fraud. Amazing what people forget about their applications from 25 years ago. Clock's ticking. Eleanor wasn't giving up. She was going after Mom's benefits, trying to find any technical violation from decades past. The same benefits that kept Mom independent, that paid for her medications and equipment. I showed Agent Martinez the text. Her face hardened. Witness intimidation. She just bought herself another federal charge. She made a call. I need a team at Boston Disability Services. The Sterling family might try to access or alter federal benefit records. That night, in an anonymous hotel room with federal agents in the hallway, Mom and I sat together, watching the city lights. Tomorrow, the Sterling Empire would begin its public collapse. But tonight, we were safe together and fighting back. I'm proud of you, Mom said softly. It takes real courage to stand up to power. I learned from you, I replied. Every day you got up and faced the world despite the pain, despite the challenges. You taught me that dignity matters more than comfort." Outside, Boston slept peacefully, unaware that tomorrow would bring a reckoning decades in the making. The Sterling family had crushed dozens of victims, thinking wealth made them untouchable. They were about to learn otherwise. Wednesday morning, October 23rd, began at 5 a.m. with synchronized raids across Boston. I watched from our hotel room as live news coverage showed FBI agents swarming Sterling Industries headquarters, their Beacon Hill mansion, and Eleanor's charity offices simultaneously. "This is unprecedented," the reporter breathlessly announced. "Federal agents are removing boxes of documents from one of Boston's most prominent families. We're told arrests are imminent." Agent Martinez had warned us to stay away from windows, keep curtains drawn, and answer no calls except from her team. But nothing could stop us from watching the news as the Sterling empire publicly crumbled. By 7 a.m., the first arrest happened. Richard Sterling, pajama-clad and handcuffed, was led from his mansion while news helicopters circled overhead. His attorney arrived too late, screaming about rights and warrants, while Richard was placed in an FBI vehicle. "Where's Eleanor?" Mom wondered. "Surely they're arresting her too." The answer came an hour later. Eleanor had tried to flee, caught at Logan Airport attempting to board a private jet to Switzerland. The footage of her being arrested on the tarmac, designer heels clicking as she was marched back to a federal vehicle, would become iconic. But Nathan remained missing. "We need to find your ex-fiancé," Agent Martinez told me during a check-in call. "His passport was used to leave the country 2 days ago, Mexico City. Then the trail goes cold." Nathan had run, leaving his parents to face justice alone. Somehow, that didn't surprise me. When faced with actual consequences, the golden boy had chosen self-preservation over family loyalty. By noon, the evidence discoveries began leaking to media. Marcus Chen, working with federal authorities, published the first in a series of exposés that would win him a Pulitzer. "Sterling Charity gave only 1.8% to actual causes," read the headline. The article detailed how Eleanor's foundation had funded lavish gala salaries for family friends and consulting fees that circled back to Sterling-owned companies. But the real bombshells came from the seized computers. Email chains showing bribery negotiations, spreadsheets tracking which judges owed favors, a literal blackmail folder containing compromising information on half of Boston's elite. Then came the recording that changed everything. Among Eleanor's personal files, investigators found an encrypted folder labeled "Insurance." Inside were recordings of conversations she'd secretly made, apparently to protect herself if Richard ever turned on her. Instead, she documented their crimes in devastating detail. One recording, dated the week before my wedding, captured Eleanor and Richard discussing my mother. "The disabled woman is a problem," Eleanor's voice stated coldly. "She'll contaminate the bloodline." "So handle it like we handled Jennifer's situation," Richard replied. "Destroy the mother, the daughter falls in line." "Or we could be more permanent," Eleanor suggested. "Accidents happen to disabled people, wheelchairs malfunction, medications get mixed up." "Too risky right before the wedding," Richard cautioned. "After they're married, though." I collapsed when Agent Martinez played the recording. They'd been planning to kill my mother. Not just destroy her financially or socially, actually kill her, making it look like an accident related to her disability. "This changes everything," Agent Martinez said grimly. "We're adding conspiracy to commit murder to the charges. They'll never see freedom again." The news hit the media within hours. The Sterling scandal exploded from financial crimes to attempted murder conspiracy. Protesters gathered outside Sterling Industries, many of them disabled individuals or their families, carrying signs reading, "Disability is not contamination," and "Sterling eugenics exposed." That afternoon, an unexpected call came through. Jennifer, watching from California, had seen the news about the murder conspiracy. "There's something else," she said, her voice shaking. My brother didn't die in a car accident. I told everyone that because I was terrified, but he committed suicide 2 months after I broke the engagement. Eleanor had called his group home repeatedly, telling them he was dangerous, that he needed to be restrained more. She filed false reports about violent tendencies. They medicated him so heavily he couldn't function. He left a note saying he didn't want to be a burden to me anymore. The revelation broke what remained of public sympathy for the Sterlings. A young man with autism driven to suicide by Eleanor's campaign of harassment. The medical board announced investigations into the facility that had over-medicated him based on false reports. By evening, the Sterling empire was in total collapse. Business partners severed ties. The country club expelled them permanently. Political allies distanced themselves with carefully worded statements. 3 more arrests were made, Sterling Industries executives who'd participated in the fraud. But the most dramatic moment came at 8 p.m. Nathan appeared on television broadcasting from somewhere tropical. He looked haggard, unshaven, his golden boy image completely gone. I want to make a deal, he announced to the camera. Full immunity in exchange for my testimony. I know where all the bodies are buried, literally and figuratively. I have recordings, documents, everything my parents thought they'd destroyed, but I'll only talk if I get complete immunity and witness protection. That pathetic coward, Mom spat, selling out his own parents to save himself. Agent Martinez's phone rang immediately. After a terse conversation, she turned to us. The Attorney General wants to know if you'd support an immunity deal for Nathan in exchange for his testimony. Absolutely not, I said immediately. He participated in everything. He forged my signatures, drained my accounts, threatened me. He doesn't get to walk away clean. What if we could guarantee life sentences for Eleanor and Richard without his testimony? She asked. We might have enough. Then we don't need him, Mom said firmly. That boy stood at the altar and laughed while his mother called me a mistake. He doesn't deserve mercy. The public seemed to agree. No immunity, for Nathan trended within minutes of his appearance. Other Sterling victims called into news shows sharing how Nathan had personally participated in their destruction. His image as Eleanor's manipulated son evaporated as story after story revealed his willing involvement. That night, unable to sleep, I scrolled through social media. The Sterling scandal had triggered a national conversation about wealth, privilege, and accountability. Disability rights groups used the momentum to push for stronger protections. Financial reform advocates cited the Sterling crimes as evidence of systemic corruption. But between the policy discussions and outrage, I found something else: messages from other victims finding courage to speak up about their own tormentors. Women who'd been silenced by powerful families. Families destroyed by corporate retaliation. People inspired to fight back because one bride had refused to stay quiet. You started something, Mom said, finding me on the hotel balcony at 3 a.m. This is bigger than just us now. I just wanted them to stop hurting you, I said. I never imagined it would become this. The most important fights usually start that way, she replied, one person saying enough at exactly the right moment. As dawn approached, my phone buzzed with a message from Marcus Chen. Eleanor cracked. Full confession in exchange for possibility of parole after 25 years. She's giving up everyone. Judges, politicians, business leaders. This is going to reshape Boston's power structure. The Sterling dynasty, built on generations of corruption and cruelty, had unraveled in less than a week. But the real victory wasn't their downfall. It was the chorus of voices now brave enough to speak truth to power. My wedding might have been a disaster, but its cancellation had become a catalyst for justice. Sometimes the best gift you can give yourself is the courage to walk away. And sometimes that courage inspires others to do the same. The sun rose over Boston, painting the sky in shades of hope. The Sterling family would face justice, their victims would find vindication, and somewhere in the city, other tyrants were probably sleeping a little less soundly. Good. 3 weeks after the raids, I sat in a federal courthouse in downtown Boston, preparing to testify before a grand jury. The Sterling case had exploded into the largest corruption investigation in Massachusetts history, with tentacles reaching into every corner of the state's power structure. Agent Martinez sat beside me in the witness room. "You don't have to do this," she said for the 10th time. "We have Eleanor's confession, Richard's financial records, and testimony from 47 other victims. Your job is done." "No," I said firmly. "I need to speak my truth in court. They tried to silence me with shame and threats. Using my voice is how I take my power back." The courtroom was closed to media, but I could feel the weight of history as I took the stand. 23 grand jurors listened as I detailed everything: the systematic attempt to erase my identity, the financial manipulation, the threats against my mother, the planned murder plot I'd only learned about through Eleanor's own recordings. "Ms. Thompson," the prosecutor asked, "why do you think Eleanor Sterling targeted your mother specifically?" "Because my mother represented everything Eleanor feared," I answered. "Strength without wealth, dignity without status, love without conditions. My mother's existence proved that Eleanor's entire worldview, that worth comes from money and physical perfection, was a lie. She couldn't stand that." And I testified for 3 hours, presenting my notebooks, playing Nathan's recorded threats, walking through each instance of fraud and intimidation. When I finally stepped down, several jurors were wiping away tears. That afternoon, the grand jury returned indictments on 93 counts against Richard Sterling, 87 against Eleanor, and 64 against Nathan, who remained a fugitive. 17 other individuals, including judges and city officials, were also indicted. But the real victory came the next week. Dr. Hamilton called with news that made me cry for the first time since the wedding. The hospital board held an emergency meeting. "In light of the evidence that your suspension was criminally motivated retaliation, they're reinstating you with full back pay, a formal apology, and a promotion. The board member who pushed for your suspension, he resigned after being indicted for taking Sterling bribes." I returned to work the following Monday to find my entire unit decorated with welcome back signs. My colleagues had fought for me throughout the ordeal, and my young patients had made drawings of superhero nurses fighting villains that looked suspiciously like Eleanor Sterling. "You're our hero," said Timmy, a 7-year-old recovering from surgery. "You stood up to the bad guys, just like Captain America." If only he knew how scared I'd been the whole time. More victories followed in rapid succession. The state unfroze all my accounts and added penalties for the illegal freezing. The forged signatures on wedding contracts were ruled fraudulent, releasing me from any financial obligation. A victims fund established from seized Sterling assets would compensate everyone they destroyed over the years. Jennifer flew in from California for Richard and Eleanor's sentencing. We sat together in the packed courtroom as the judge read the verdicts. Richard Sterling guilty on all counts, sentenced to 45 years in federal prison. Eleanor Sterling guilty on all counts, sentenced to 35 years with possibility of parole after 25. The defendants, the judge stated, used their wealth and privilege as weapons against anyone they deemed inferior. They corrupted public institutions, destroyed innocent lives, and showed a callous disregard for human dignity. These sentences reflect the severity of their crimes and send a message justice cannot be bought. Eleanor, who'd maintained her composure throughout the trial, finally broke, not with tears of remorse, but with rage. "You ungrateful nobody!" she screamed at me as guards moved to restrain her. "I could have given you everything. You destroyed a legacy built over generations." "No," I called back, my voice steady. "You destroyed it yourself, brick by brick, victim by victim. I just refused to be another casualty." As they led her away, Eleanor's perfect facade finally shattered completely. The woman who'd ruled Boston society with an iron fist was reduced to shouting obscenities while being dragged to prison in shackles. Outside the courthouse, hundreds had gathered, victims of the Sterling's disability rights advocates and supporters who'd followed the case. When Jennifer and I emerged, the crowd erupted in cheers. "Thank you," a woman called out. "My husband lost his business to the Sterlings 10 years ago. Seeing them face justice, it's everything." An elderly man in a wheelchair rolled up to my mother. "You raised a warrior," he said simply. "Be proud." "Every single day," Mom replied, tears streaming down her face. That evening, we held a celebration at Anna's apartment, not a victory party. Too many people had suffered for that, but a gathering of survivors. Jennifer, the Wellington Society women who'd testified, Sterling victims who'd found each other through the trial, all united by shared trauma and shared triumph. Margaret Wellington raised a glass of champagne. To Isabel, who reminded us that courage is contagious, and to Sarah, who proved that real class can't be bought or bullied away. As the evening wore on, Marcus Chen arrived with news that put the perfect cap on everything. "Nathan Sterling was arrested an hour ago in Costa Rica," he announced. "He ran out of money and tried to access hidden Sterling accounts, triggered alerts we'd placed. He's being extradited tonight." The room erupted in celebration. The last Sterling was coming home to face justice. But the best moment came later in the quiet after everyone left. Mom and I sat on Anna's balcony, the Boston skyline glittering before us. "Do you regret any of it?" she asked. "You could have had wealth, status, everything Eleanor promised." "I have everything," I said, taking her hand. "I have my integrity. I have my voice. I have you, and I have the knowledge that when tested, I chose right over easy." "Your father would be so proud," she whispered. "His daughter, the dragon slayer." 6 months after my aborted wedding, I stood in the same church, not as a bride, but as a speaker at a fundraiser for the Sterling Victims Fund. The space that had witnessed my humiliation now hosted my triumph. I spoke about the price of silence, the cost of complicity, and the power of standing up even when you're standing alone. The audience, many of them the same society figures who'd watched Eleanor mock my mother, listened with what looked like genuine reflection. The Sterling family taught me something valuable, I concluded. They showed me that wealth without wisdom is poverty, that power without principles is weakness, and that the only approval that matters is the person you see in the mirror. They tried to break me by attacking what I loved most, my mother. Instead, they revealed what I was made of. And what I'm made of is the strength of every woman who came before me, who faced hardship with grace and cruelty with courage. The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes, but the only approval I needed came from my mother, beaming from the front row in her wheelchair, no longer hidden, but celebrated. Later, as we left the church, where everything had begun, a young woman approached. She looked nervous but determined. "My fiancé's family is like the Sterlings," she said quietly. "They want me to change everything about myself after seeing what you did. I called off my engagement this morning." "Are you okay?" I asked. She smiled through tears. "I'm free. Thank you for showing me that's worth more than their money." As we drove home to our small apartment in Southie, we'd refused the victims' fund money, suggesting it go to those who needed it more. I realized the true victory wasn't the Sterling family's downfall. It was the ripple effect of courage spreading outward like waves from a stone thrown in still water. One bride standing up to her bullies had inspired dozens of others to find their voices. One mother's dignity in the face of mockery had reminded people that worth isn't measured in wealth. One family's refusal to be erased had exposed corruption festering in society's highest ranks. The Sterlings had promised to destroy us. Instead, they'd created something they never intended, a reckoning that changed Boston forever, and a reminder that love, real love, the kind that doesn't demand you diminish yourself to receive it, always wins in the end. 1 year after the wedding that never was, I stood in my new office at Boston Children's Hospital. The promotion that came with my reinstatement included leading a new initiative, a support program for families of disabled children, funded partly by the Sterling Victims Compensation Fund. "Ready for your first day as director?" Dr. Hamilton asked, beaming with pride. "Though I still can't believe you turned down 3 other hospitals trying to poach you." "This is home," I said simply. "Besides, the best revenge against people who tried to make me small is living large right where they tried to bury me." The phone on my new desk rang. Still getting used to having an office phone, I answered professionally. "Pediatric Family Support Services, Isabel Thompson speaking." "Belle?" The voice made my stomach clench. "Nathan, calling from federal prison where he was serving 25 years after being extradited and convicted." "How did you get this number?" I demanded. "Please don't hang up," he said quickly. "I'm calling to apologize. My lawyer said I shouldn't, but I need you to know I'm sorry for all of it." "You're sorry you got caught," I corrected. "No." His voice was different, older, broken. "I'm sorry I became the man my mother raised me to be instead of the man you deserved. I've had a lot of time to think in here, about how I laughed when she hurt your mother, about how I chose their approval over your love, about how I let them turn me into a weapon against anyone who didn't fit their mold." I sank into my chair. "Nathan, I know forgiveness is too much to ask," he continued, "but I wanted you to know that the work you're doing helping families like yours, it matters. Maybe if someone had stood up to my mother earlier, shown me a different way, maybe I could have been better." "You had choices, Nathan. You made them." "I know. I'm not asking for anything. I wanted you to know that I understand now what I lost. Not the money or status. You, the only real thing in my life, and I let them convince me you weren't enough." After I hung up, I sat quietly for a moment. Nathan's call didn't erase the pain or excuse his actions, but maybe prison was teaching him what privilege never could: accountability. My first official meeting was with the family that inspired the program. Maria Gonzalez sat across from me holding her daughter Sophia, born with cerebral palsy. "The doctors say she'll need surgeries, therapies, equipment," Maria said, overwhelmed. "I don't know how we'll afford it all. My husband works 2 jobs already, and I had to quit mine to care for her." "That's why we're here," I assured her. "This program provides not just financial assistance, but emotional support, advocacy training, and connection with other families. You don't have to do this alone." As I explained the services, funded by money seized from those who'd called disability contamination, I thought about the irony. Eleanor Sterling's hatred had inadvertently created a legacy of love. Later that week, I attended the ribbon cutting for another Sterling-funded project, the Sarah Thompson Center for Independent Living. My mother had protested using her name, but the board insisted. 25 years ago, the director said at the ceremony, Sarah Thompson had a stroke during childbirth. Doctors said she'd never walk, never work, never raise her daughter independently. Today, that daughter stands as proof that disability is not inability, and this center will ensure others get the support Sarah had to fight for alone. Mom cut the ribbon from her wheelchair, surrounded by hundreds of people whose lives would be improved by services the Sterling's seized assets now funded. Eleanor would have hated knowing her hoarded wealth was helping those she deemed inferior. Perfect. That evening, we hosted our monthly dinner for Sterling case survivors. What had started as a support group had evolved into a chosen family. Jennifer had moved back to Boston, working as an advocate for autism awareness. The Wellington Society women had formed a philanthropic group focused on actual charity, not tax shelters. Even Nathan's cousin, Emma, joined us, estranged from what remained of her family, but free. "I have news," Jennifer announced over dessert. "I'm getting married, for real this time." We erupted in congratulations. She'd met Daniel, a special education teacher, at an autism advocacy event. He adored her brother, understood her past, and loved her without requiring transformation. This small ceremony, she continued, just family and friends who've proven they deserve to be there. Isabel, will you be my maid of honor? You showed me it was possible to walk away and survive. Through happy tears, I agreed. Her wedding would be everything ours weren't: authentic, joyful, and free from the poison of judgment. As the evening wound down, Margaret Wellington pulled me aside. There's something you should know, she said quietly. Eleanor's been assigned to work in the prison library. Apparently, she's been checking out every book on disability rights and social justice. The librarian says she reads obsessively, like she's trying to understand something that never made sense before. Trying to understand what I asked. You, your mother, how people without money or power could defeat her. I think in her twisted way, she's finally learning what strength actually looks like. I didn't know how to feel about Eleanor's prison education. Her awakening, if real, came too late for her victims. But maybe understanding would be its own punishment. Realizing she'd spent her life pursuing fool's gold while stepping on diamonds. A month later, I was leaving the hospital after a late shift when a familiar figure stepped from the shadows. My heart raced until I realized it wasn't a Sterling associate, but someone unexpected: Richard Sterling's brother Thomas. I'm not here to cause trouble, he said quickly, hands raised. I've been estranged from Richard for 20 years, refused to join the family business when I saw what it really was. What do you want? I asked warily. To thank you, he said simply, and to give you this. He handed me an old leather journal, my grandmother's diary, the first Mrs. Sterling, before the family lost its way. She was a nurse, actually, worked with immigrants in the North End. She'd have been appalled by what Eleanor made of the Sterling name. I opened the diary carefully, finding pages filled with compassionate observations about the families she'd served. The Sterling legacy hadn't always been poison. It had been corrupted by those who confused wealth with worth. I thought you should have this, Thomas continued. Proof that choosing humanity over status was actually the most Sterling thing you could have done. The real Sterling thing before they forgot what it meant. As he walked away, I stood holding the diary of a woman whose descendants had betrayed everything she'd valued. But her words, like my grandmother's dress, proved that true legacy isn't what you leave in bank accounts, but in the lives you touch. That night, I showed Mom the diary. We read passages together, finding unexpected kinship with the first Mrs. Sterling. Two women separated by a century, but united in understanding that service to others was the only wealth that mattered. You know what this means, Mom said. You didn't destroy the Sterling legacy. You restored it, brought it back to what it should have been all along. I thought about that as I prepared for bed in my childhood room, still choosing to live with Mom, not from necessity, but from love. The Sterlings had tried to erase me, to make me ashamed of where I came from. Instead, I'd helped expose their shame while honoring my own roots. My phone buzzed with a text from James, the physical therapist I'd been dating for 6 months. He'd lost his leg in Afghanistan and understood both sacrifice and strength. Unlike Nathan, he was impressed by my mother's resilience, not embarrassed. He saw her wheelchair as a battle scar, not a burden. Dinner tomorrow, your mom too, found a new accessible restaurant that just opened. I smiled, texting back confirmation. Love, when it's real, doesn't demand you choose between it and your family. It expands to include everyone you cherish. As I drifted off to sleep, I thought about the journey from that devastating rehearsal dinner to now. The Sterlings had promised to ruin me. In a way, they had. They'd ruined any chance I'd settle for conditional love, shallow values, or silencing my truth. Sometimes ruin is just another word for liberation. The girl who tried on different versions of herself to fit the Sterling mold was gone. In her place stood a woman who knew exactly who she was, Isabel Marie Thompson, daughter of Sarah and James. granddaughter of women who'd sewn their own wedding dresses and faced hardship with grace, director of programs that helped families like hers, survivor of an engagement that would have killed her spirit, thriver in a life built on authentic values. The Sterlings were in prison, but I was free, and freedom I'd learned was worth any price, even a $300,000 wedding that never happened. 2 years after the wedding that wasn't, I stood in the same church again, but this time, everything was different. The space glowed with simple beauty, wildflowers from my mother's garden instead of thousands of roses handmade decorations, crafted by patients from the Children's Hospital, and only 50 guests who truly mattered. No string quartet played processional music. Instead, my colleague David's daughter performed on her violin a piece she'd composed called Rising Strong. "You ready, sweetheart?" Mom asked, adjusting the simple veil attached to my grandmother's pearl pin. She stood beside me using her new specialized crutches, the ones that allowed her more mobility and independence. 2 years of better health care, funded by my promoted salary, not Sterling guilt, had improved her condition significantly. "More ready than I've ever been," I said, smoothing my grandmother's dress. It had been cleaned and restored, but not altered. Every stitch remained as my grandmother had sewn it, as my mother had worn it, authentic and perfect in its imperfection. James waited at the altar, his prosthetic leg visible beneath his dress blues. He'd insisted on wearing his military uniform medals, and all saying he wanted to honor both our father's service. Beside him stood his best man Marcus, a fellow veteran who'd lost his sight in the same IED explosion. No one was hidden. No one was ashamed. Everyone was exactly who they were meant to be. As we walked down the aisle, Mom and I together, neither supporting the other but walking as equals, I saw our guests, Jennifer with her new husband and her brother who served as an usher, Margaret Wellington, now heading a reformed charity board, Dr. Hamilton and my entire hospital unit, Anna, my maid of honor, crying already, the families from our support program showing that our community was built on shared strength, not shared status. Even Thomas Sterling sat near the back, the uncle who'd returned his grandmother's legacy to its rightful values. He nodded as I passed, acknowledging what the Sterling name now meant in Boston, a cautionary tale and a catalyst for change. The ceremony was brief, personal, everything the Sterling production hadn't been. When the minister asked for objections, a ripple of laughter went through the crowd. That tradition held different meaning for all of us now. "I have something to say," James announced, turning to the congregation. "Not an objection, but a promise. I promise to love not just Isabel, but everyone she loves. Sarah, you're not gaining a son-in-law. You're gaining another person who sees you as the hero you are. I promise to support Isabel's work, her values, and her refusal to let anyone make her small. And I promise that in our home, everyone will always be welcome exactly as they are." When we kissed, the cheering could probably be heard in Boston Harbor. But the loudest cheer came from Timmy, my former patient, now healthy and running up with rings tied to his Superman cape. The reception happened in the church fellowship hall, catered by local restaurants we loved, not whatever was most impressive. No 7-course tasting menu, just good food and better company. The wedding cake came from the bakery where Mom had worked one of her 3 jobs, made by the owner who remembered baby Isabel doing homework in the back room. "I need to tell you all something," I said during the toasts. 2 years ago, I stood at this altar and chose myself over a life that would have required me to erase who I was. It was the hardest and best decision I've ever made. Not because it led me to James, though I'm grateful it did, but because it led me back to myself, and that self was worth fighting for. Mom spoke next, steady on her crutches. "People say I raised a strong daughter, but the truth is, she taught me strength. When someone called me a mistake in a dress, Isabel showed me that the only mistake was letting small people make us feel small. Today, I'm not just proud of who she's marrying. I'm proud of who she's become, someone who builds others up instead of tearing them down. The dancing lasted until midnight, made more beautiful by its imperfections. Mom swayed in her chair, spinning with James's father. Veterans with various disabilities owned the dance floor, proving that joy doesn't require wholeness, just heart. Children from the hospital ran between adults' legs, high on cake and happiness. No regrets, James asked as we took a break, watching our families blend seamlessly. Only one, I admitted. I regret it took me so long to see Nathan and his family clearly, all those months trying to become what they wanted, when what I was already enough. Their loss, he said simply, my gain. Near the end of the reception, Margaret Wellington approached with an envelope. A wedding gift, she said, though it's really completing something that should have happened years ago. Inside was a check for $5 million. I nearly dropped it. Eleanor stole this from charities over the years, Margaret explained. The courts returned what they could trace, but this was hidden in offshore accounts. Those of us who were complicit through silence have agreed it should go to the real charity work Eleanor pretended to do, your program specifically. I can't accept this, I protested. You can and you will, she said firmly. Consider it the Sterling family, finally contributing something positive to society. Besides, she smiled, it's rather poetic that Eleanor's hoarded wealth will fund programs for the very people she despised. As James and I left for our honeymoon, a simple week in Maine, not a European tour designed to impress, rice rained down from hands that had all been touched by our story somehow. Sterling survivors, families from our programs, colleagues who'd supported me, new friends who'd emerged from unexpected places. Thank you, I called out to everyone, for showing me that real family isn't about blood or marriage certificates. It's about showing up, standing up, and lifting up. You're all my family. In the car driven by Marcus the valet who'd supported me that terrible day, I thought about the winding path from humiliation to happiness. The Sterling family sat in their respective prisons, Richard and Eleanor serving their sentences, Nathan somewhere in minimum security, probably still blaming everyone but himself. But their victims had become victors. Jennifer ran a nonprofit supporting families with autistic children. The Wellington women had reformed Boston's charity circuit, making it about service instead of status. My programs had helped hundreds of families navigate disability with dignity. And me, I'd gained everything by refusing to lose myself. Where to, Mrs. Reeves? Marcus asked, grinning at my new name. Home, I said, though I didn't mean the honeymoon suite. I meant the life we were building where everyone was welcome, where different abilities were celebrated, where love multiplied instead of divided. As we drove through Boston's streets, past the hospital where I'd found my purpose, past the courthouse, where justice had finally prevailed, past the neighborhoods where real people lived, real lives, I felt complete. Not because I'd found Prince Charming. Fairy tales were Eleanor's fantasy, not mine. But because I'd found something better, a partner who saw strength where others saw weakness, who understood that the best families are built on acceptance, not appearances. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. So proud of you, baby. Dad would be too. Now, go enjoy your honeymoon. The fight for justice can wait a week. She was right. The fight would continue. There would always be more Eleanors, more systems that valued wealth over worth. But tonight I was just Isabel, granddaughter of a seamstress, daughter of a warrior wife of a man who understood that real love doesn't demand perfection. It demands truth. And truth, I'd learned, was the most beautiful dress you could wear. As Boston's skyline faded in the rearview mirror, I thought about that scared girl in the Ritz bathroom, taking anxiety medication, while Eleanor spread lies about her mother. That girl thought she had to choose between love and loyalty, between advancement and authenticity. She was wrong. You can have both, just not with people who make you choose. The sterling silver spoon I'd been offered came with too high a price, my soul, so I'd chosen the stainless steel of my mother's kitchen, dented but durable, humble but honest. And reader, it turned out to be worth more than all the sterling silver in the world. "You okay?" James asked, squeezing my hand as we headed toward our future. "Perfect," I said, meaning it completely. Absolutely, authentically, unapologetically perfect. And for the first time in my life, that perfection had nothing to do with meeting someone else's standards. It had everything to do with exceeding my own. What would you have done in my situation? Would you have stood up to your in-laws at the altar or tried to keep the peace? I'd love to hear your stories of standing up to bullies or choosing authenticity over acceptance. Please comment below and share your experiences. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more stories about real people facing impossible choices with courage. And if you know someone who needs to hear that they're enough exactly as they are, please share this story with them. Thank you for joining me on this journey from humiliation to triumph. Remember, you are not a mistake in any dress. You are a masterpiece in progress, and anyone who can't see that doesn't deserve a place in your gallery. Until next time, keep choosing truth over treasure and love over luxury. You're worth it.